Today I'm going to talk about my Necron list 8th edition and how I discovered that my Necron list sucks. Stay tuned to find out what I'm going to do about it.
Necrons!
Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. Right, in today's Necron video I'm going to follow up on my Confrontation 3 tournament journey. I'm going to split the video up into 3 separate parts. Part 1 will be a quick overview and history of my journey with an Assault Necron list. Part 2 is going to be the journey so far with my Confrontation list, how it developed along the way, and how I discovered that it sucks. And part 3 is going to be talking about my 2 new Necron lists for the event, and I'm going to be looking for some feedback on that one. Before that though, if you would like to keep up to date with the Wonders of Warhammer 40k, not miss a Necron upload, then please subscribe and hit the bell button so you don't miss a video. Okay, so part 1, a brief history of my Assault Necron list. It all started a good few years ago where I made a video series called the Necron Learning Curve. One of those videos covered the Necron Flayed Ones. Back in those days, Flayed Ones were really bad. However, after that video, I decided, hey, I wonder if I could make a Flayed One army and make the Flayed Ones work. And that was my task that I set myself. Over a period of about 6 months, I collected 60 Flayed Ones, mostly from eBay and mostly broken. However, I converted them back up to full good health and I had myself a 60 strong Flayed One list. In that list I had Wraiths, Scarabs and some troops to sit on backfield objectives. I did reasonably well, only down to the fact that I had so many Flayed Ones on the table to compensate how bad they were. And then Games Workshop decided to change the tables on me, and they made Flayed Ones good, especially with the Decurion detachment where you could have a 4+ RP army wide. I had 60 Flayed Ones with a 4+ RP roll. I had a lot of fun playing that list, and then 8th edition hit, in particular their index, which pushed our Flayed Ones up to 21 points each, where previously I believe they were 13 points. Now with the codex they have come down, but still 17 points. So it was 170 points for 10 Flayed Ones. That's meant less Flayed Ones on the table, plus the way that everything else was point costed made making my list very difficult. I had to develop the list. I actually went from taking a Flayed One list to taking a Wraith list, because Wraiths got a lot better, even though yes, they went up in points. So I was using some Wraiths, some Scarab Swarms, a couple of squads of Flayed Ones, and then some troops at the back to take objectives. I thought I was coming up with a good list. I had Novokh Dynasty for the assault element, and the Mefrit Dynasty for the shooting element of the list. I was very happy with my list. I felt I had a solid list ready to play. So when I got an opportunity to go to the Confrontation 3 tournament, I signed up. And then I read the tournament pack and the limitations within it. And that brings me nicely on to topic number 2. Okay, so topic number 2, my list development and journey as I play tested ready for the event. Okay, so I had a look in the Confrontation 3 rules pack, where I discovered that unless you have your armies painted in the correct dynasty colours, you would be marked down. So that meant if I wanted mixed dynasties, I'd have to paint them differently. Now I have over 14,000 points worth of Necrons, and they're all painted in my own colour scheme. And there was no way in the world that I was going to repaint any of my models, and I didn't want to buy new models to paint for this event. I'm not really a tournament player. This is only my 3rd event that I've ever been to, and I don't plan to go on too many more. I can imagine that if I did play in events every month, I would be quite happy to buy new models and paint them ready to play. But I don't want to do that. I'm more of a collector and a casual gamer than a tournament player. So I made the conscious decision that I would have to go single dynasty for my list, and I thought, well, if I'm going to go single dynasty, why not go full Novokh, full assault Crons? After all, I've been playing this type of army for a good number of years, so I worked on a list. So I was restricted to one dynasty, and I also decided that if I was going to go full Novokh, full assault, that I didn't want any guns in my army. I thought that would be quite a nice restriction to go full out assault. So that's what I did. So the event was 2,000 points, and my first list was an Outrider detachment with a Destroyer Lord, a Scythe, Nano Scarab Casket and Crimson Haze. Elites, I had one squad of 15 flayed ones and one squad of 16 flayed ones. And then in the fast attack I had 3 squads of 6 wraiths and 3 squads of 9 scarabs, which brought me in at 1999 points. Now this is only going to give me 4 command points, so I was quite limited on my command points, using those command points mainly to reanimate the wraiths. Now, one thing that I really wanted in the list, which I couldn't do, was I'd rather have had 3 squads of 10 flayed ones rather than the 2 big squads. I find that flayed ones go down just as quickly whether you have a smaller squad or whether you have a bigger squad. So 3 squads of 10 would have been ideal, but of course in the detachment I'm limited to 2 elites slots. So this was my starting point. Now I played this list first of all against Richard, and he was playing his Eldar and Dark Eldar. It was a great game, and I actually won that game. I got a minor victory. I had to deploy all of the objectives as much as I could on my side of the table. And that actually gave me the win, getting more points than Richard. In actual fact, I was only 1 point away from having a major victory. A good start. However, I did notice that the flayed ones, as I thought, went down very quickly even though I had those bigger squads. So I tried to develop the list, bring those flayed ones down to 10 in each unit, maybe add something else to the list. So in my second incarnation of the list, I had 2 squads of 10 flayed ones, giving me some points to spare. Now the next game that I had planned was against Richard and his 1,000 sons, including Magnus. He was going to do a lot of mortal wounds, mainly from psychic powers. So I thought I would probably face this type of list at the event. It would probably be a good idea to get some gloom prisms into the list. So I added 2 spiders with prisms to this list, and they were 1 unit of 2 just to keep my drops and my kill points down as much as possible. I had a few points left and just added a whip coil to one of the wraiths, but otherwise the list stayed the same. In that game against Richard, I faced Magnus for the first time. He was tough to take down with my list. In actual fact, I didn't kill a single thing of Richard's army. Now, to be fair, he was using 3 Forge World Decimators, which I won't see at the event. However, I did get a reasonable amount of victory points in that game at the beginning. However, by the end of it, I just didn't have enough on the table, and Richard forged forward as the game went on. Now, the games are going to last 2.5 hours at the event. Now, Richard and I were playing for much longer than that in both of our games, and it was quite clear to me that actually I was racking up a good amount of victory points at the beginning of the games, but towards the end I was struggling. Now, it could mean that if the game ends after 2.5 hours and I've got more victory points than my opponent and I'm not tabled, then potentially I do have a chance of winning these games. So I went back to the drawing board and had another look at my list. Okay, so game 3, and this time I was ready to playtest my list against an Imperial Knights army. I invited Nick from Old Average Brit Gaming. He has a YouTube channel just there. Check that out if you haven't done so already. And Nick brought a very nicely painted Imperial Knights army for me to face. And once again, like Magnus, I've never faced Imperial Knights before, so this was going to be a real test for me. In the meantime, I've been chatting to Aceface. Now Aceface is coming to the event with me and he's a very good tournament player. I'll link you up to his channel just there. Now Aceface doesn't play Necrons, but he has seen them quite a bit on the battlefield. Now he said that when he looks at my list, it's easy to see what I'm up to. I'm basically looking at turn 2 assault. Okay, I can use a stratagem and get 1 unit of wraiths into assault turn 1, but basically yes, he's right. He also said he wasn't really scared of my list. He suggested putting the Deceiver in the list to try and manipulate that first turn assault. But of course you can't assault after you move with the Deceiver. That's more designed for shooting. Ace didn't quite appreciate that. However, he still thought that moving those wraiths forwards, getting those wraiths in your enemy's face on turn 1 could actually be more beneficial and more scary. So I thought I would try out Ace's idea against Nick. Now it's fair to say that I wasn't expecting to win this game. An assault army against an Imperial Knight army, the odds weren't good, and as expected I didn't win that. In actual fact, I got totally tabled. It was a fun game, I really did enjoy myself, but as I suspected, the Deceiver's ability to move those wraiths forward, although it sounds really good, not being able to assault afterwards is a major drawback. So I decided to re-evaluate the list with the Deceiver in it. Now, it's fair to say that I did see the power of the Deceiver. In close combat, he did a lot of damage. So I thought, well, how about, as opposed to the Deceiver, I could have the Nightbringer. So I was just about to make my list with the Nightbringer, and then Confrontation 3 changed the points level. They dropped it down to 1800 points. So I had to really jiggle my list down to 1800 points and get the Nightbringer in it. So the first thing I did was drop my 2 Tomb Spiders. The Gloom Prisms were useful, but the spiders themselves really didn't do that much. So I dropped them, saving me 140 points. With the Nightbringer in there as opposed to the Deceiver and everything else the same, I had to reduce the quantity of flayed ones. Now this wasn't a problem because I was already thinking of having my flayed ones as a very small unit. Along the way of playing these games, I discovered that flayed ones probably aren't really worth the points at this top level of tournament play. I think for casual games, I think they're absolutely fine and worth the points. But when you're trying to get the most out of the points, I don't think the flayed ones really work. So what I was thinking was a very small unit of flayed ones coming in on turn 3 and hiding to stop you being tabled. So I had my new 1800 point list and I decided to take it up against Richard. Now once again, Richard has his own YouTube channel. I'll link you up just there. Now, in that game he played his Eldar stroke Dark Eldar once again. This time a different mission. I didn't have all of the objectives on my side of the table. In actual fact, it was the mission where you had to grab the objectives at the end of the game. And with all of his psychic powers, Doom, Jinx and Guide, 3 Fire Prisms, Morgan Ra, or the Venoms, he quite easily whittled me down 1 Wraith unit at a time. I actually needed those flayed ones on the table on turn 3, hiding just to not get tabled. And it was at this point that I thought to myself, Nick, if you're taking units specifically not to get tabled, then there's something wrong with your list. Your list sucks. Okay, so topic number 3. Now what am I going to do? So I discovered that my list just isn't going to perform at this top end level. Now yes, I could still take the list, just play for fun, see what happens, but I really want to do well at this event. I want to win at least 2 or 3 games. Now I think I could do this if I ended up playing against the right opponent and I had the right mission and I had the right objectives in the right place and I got first turn. But that's a lot of ifs. Now looking back at the games that I played, the one that I won, I only won because all the objectives were over on my side. I think if the objectives had been on the other side of the table, I would have struggled and probably lost all 4 games. Now the other thing about my list, and what's quite apparent about it, is that it's all about turn 2. Now at the event, let's face it, most of the armies are going to be about turn 1. How much they can blast off the table on turn 1. So all of a sudden I was at a disadvantage straight away. I think that was part and parcel of my downfall of the list. With the restrictions that I've set upon myself for this assault list, i.e. 1 dynasty and no guns. Okay, the Nightbringer has a bit of a gun, but we'll just overlook that one. But I think with all of the restrictions that I've got for the list, I just can't make this list work at this level of play. So I thought, back to the drawing board, let's have a rethink about this and see if I can come up with something better. Okay, so sticking with the 1 dynasty theme, bearing in mind it doesn't matter which dynasty I go for, because you don't have to have them painted like the dynasty as long as you only have 1 dynasty. So 1 dynasty it is. Now I've made 2 separate lists. I'm going to run over them now. I'm going to playtest both of them, but I would love to know which list you think is the best one, which list you think I should take to the event. So the first list, I wanted to maintain some Wraiths in the list. It's one of my favourite models. I've been playing them a lot, and I thought it would be great to have them in the list still. However, I also felt like I needed some troops and I needed some anti-tank. So let's have a quick run through of list number 1. Okay, so list number 1 is going to be a Catacomb Command Barge with a Tesla gun and the Staff of Light. I'm going to have the Voltic Staff and Merciless Tyrant. I've then got a Cryptic with a Staff and Chronometron, and I'm going to use 1 command point to give him the Veil of Darkness. Troop wise, I've got 3 squads of 5 Immortals with Tesla. Elites, I've gone for 7 Tomb Blades with the Tesla cannon and 6 Veins, because I couldn't quite afford 7. Fast attack is 2 squads of 6 Wraiths, and heavy support is 2 Doomsday Arcs. Now the Doomsday Arcs are a bit random, so you do need 2 in case 1 fails, but they can do quite a lot of damage, and I think I feel a bit more secure having those Doomsday Arcs there for when I'm facing the big monsters, the big tanks and the big knights. Now this list comes in at 1999 points and gives me 8 command points. Bearing in mind my assault list was only 4 points. I've got more points to play with, more RPs on my Wraiths. Now the Wraiths themselves are still part of the army, and in this list I should be able to get 2 units, or at least have the potential to get 2 units in turn 1 assault. 1 unit will use the Veil of Darkness, and unlike the Deceiver I can assault from that, and the second unit will use the Stratagem, allowing me to advance and assault. 2 units of Wraiths charging forward, hopefully first turn assault. Now of course, unless I go for Novokh, the Wraiths are going to be less productive than they were. Now I'm not sure about using Novokh for this list because I've got quite a lot of shooting as well, and that dynasty will really only benefit the Wraiths. Of course I've got my troops now, not in huge quantities, but everything is so expensive in the Necron Codex, so I'm going to have to be satisfied with 3 units of Immortals. Now the Tomb Blades are there, they can either bubble wrap, they can flank, they're fast, they're hard to hit, and they can kick out a good amount of shots, especially with the Tesla. And the Command Barge of course is going to go forward with the ability to snipe characters. Now I've noticed people use quite a few characters, and unlike the Necron characters, they tend to be low costed. So that means hopefully I can take a few characters out along the way, and of course he can help out the Wraiths in the assault. So that is list number 1. I think that's a nice all-round list. I've got the assault element, I've got the shooting element. Now in terms of the dynasty, I think I'm going to go with Mefrit. Now I would love to have the one where you stand still and re-roll the ones on the Doomsday arcs, but that's really going to only benefit the arcs. I'd love to have Novokh for the Wraiths, but that's really only going to benefit the Wraiths. At least with the Necron Dynasty at half range, having that extra AP can benefit the whole army except for the Wraiths. So I think that's probably the way I'm going to go, but let me know what you think regarding which dynasty I should have for that list. Okay, so that's list 1. Let's have a look at list 2. Okay, so list 2. And this list has been inspired by the very first list that I made for 8th edition. It was up against Tau, it was up against Ace Face. In actual fact, it was Ace Face that suggested I take another look at this list. Now what's happened in that game is that Ace had 5 Riptides. Of course, he's not allowed to do that now, but at the time he was able to do that. And we didn't have great terrain on the table, and I rolled really badly. I ended up with just 1 model left after losing first turn and having all of those shots coming in from the Tau shooting. I just didn't do very well. However, I think the list actually had great potential. Now that list was 2,000 points, so I've had to retune it for 1,800. Okay, so the list basically consists of a cryptic with a staff and cloak, a cryptic with a staff, chrono and Vel. This is a battalion detachment, by the way. I've then got in the elite section a deceiver, and then the fast attack choice I've got 2 squads of 5 destroyers. I've got 1 heavy destroyer in one of those units because I had 7 points left. And then I've got the Lord of War auxiliary detachment, and that's the Tesseract Vault. Now in the troops slot, my previous list had 2 squads of 10 Gauls Immortals and 1 big squad of 17 warriors. Now the idea was to take this in Necron Dynasty, to use the Deceiver to teleport 1 or 2 units of Immortals, and then use the Veil of Darkness to teleport over the big unit of warriors. In the meantime, the Deceiver of course teleports forward, and then the Vault moves forward, and then the destroyers back up with firepower using the stratagems. Now of course the stratagems we can only use once per phase, so only one of those units will actually benefit from that. I will probably use it on the one without the heavy destroyer. However, I had to drop points, and it was the troops section that I actually dropped the points down. So now in the troops choice I have 2 squads of 8 Immortals with Gauls weapon and 10 Immortals. I'd love to have a bigger squad of Immortals, but I don't have the points. But I'm sure you can see how this list is going to work, and in the Necron Dynasty those Gauls weapons will be -3 AP. So that is the second list. Now I'd love to know what you think of both of those lists. Like I said, let me know in the comments box below which list you like best, which list you think I should take, and also drop me a note on the dynasties that you think I'm using for the lists. Are they the right ones, or can I use something different? Okay, so next I am going to play test both of these lists, and I'm going to do some battle reports, so stay tuned for more. And if you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing. Hit my icon at the end of the video so you can keep up to date with the Wonders of Warhammer 40k. Beam me up.